Today we are going to look at a cool season turfgrass golf course located in a unique area of the world, Venice, Italy. Flying there, I took this introductory picture of the French Alps. Venice is located in the northeast corner of Italy. The climate is Mediterranean. The summers can get quite hot, but the winters are relatively mild. Venice is next to the Adriatic Sea, but actually sits in the Venetian lagoon. Venice was built on 100 small islands, basically on mud, sand, and slime. A real inhospitable environment for building at any time, but especially when it was done over 1,000 years ago. Interconnecting these islands are waterways and bridges that act as roads. The most famous canal is the Grand Canal that S-shapes its way through Venice. Part of the Grand Canal is shown here. Just a few shots along the Grand Canal. Venice came into being in the 600 AD, or what is more commonly now referred to as 600 CE, or the Classical era. The Grand Canal was the first waterway to link these compacted little islands together. We are looking at the Rialto Bridge, what was built between 1588 and 1591 to replace some wooden bridges. This bridge was the only way to cross the Grand Canal by foot until 1854. It is located in the heart of Venice. Interestingly, that the designer of the bridge, Antonio del Ponte, competed against such eminent designers as Michelangelo and Palladio for the contract. Small canals or waterways, like side streets, intermingle through the islands. Venice is known as a romantic city. Some of that romance is associated with the gondola rides through the city. Actually, I wasn't there for romance, which is probably pretty good since these rides are expensive. And when I was there in November, it was cold and wet. In this picture, this woman doesn't seem to be much in the romantic mood. Venice is best known for its architectural design and art. This is the Doge Palace, which sits on the St. Mark's Square. The pinkish-white Gothic-style building was founded in 1340. The Gothic style is evident throughout the city, here at St. Mark's Basilica, which is part of St. Mark's Square. At one end of St. Mark's Square sits two columns. One of the columns has a winged lion, which is a symbol of the Venetian Republic on top, and the other features the figure of St. Theodore, patron saint of Venice, poking at a dragon. The columns were brought from Constantinople in the 12th century. And actually there were 3 columns, but when they arrived, one of the columns rolled off the boat and fell into the lagoon. 1,000 years later, in 2016, they found that column. I found out that Venetians are rather superstitious and do not walk between the 2 columns. They walk around. In the 18th century, the city officials turned that area between the columns into a public execution spot, and thus this superstition was born. Given the location of Venice, the city is susceptible to flooding. I was there in November, which is within the period known as Acqua Alta, which literally means high water. This was part of St. Mark's Square. We looked for a different place to have lunch. These are temporary walking bridges that allow people to move around during high water. The walking bridge is leading to St. Mark's Basilica. 2 major events are happening to Venice. The increasing flooding that is occurring, like the flooding in November of 2019, that caused major damage to the city and its art and architecture. The second thing is the city gets 20 million tourists a year, as you probably have noticed in this and the last few pictures, people with cameras. All or most of the tourists come in for just one day and really don't spend any money. Climate change and tourists have put Venice in a precarious situation. Given that this course is not about European or Italian history or architectural style, it is probably a good time for me to refocus on the turf. The golf course I visited is located on the southernmost tip of the long sandbar that separates the Laguna Venice from the Adriatic Sea. The course is Circolo Golf Venezia. As you probably have already determined, my Italian is not very good. We had to take a ferry ride on this trip from Venice to get to the golf course. The course was built around 1930 and is the oldest in the region and one of the oldest in Italy. The story regarding the founding of the golf course was instigated by Henry Ford of Ford Motor Company at the time. He was a guest of Count Volpe di Misurati. Again, I apologize for my lack of Italian diction. Henry Ford had his golf clubs and went to the Count and asked where they could play golf. The Count was actually mortified, probably because he didn't know how to play golf and worse yet, wasn't sure what the game was. Given that, the Count proceeded to build the original 9 holes in 1930, and then it was expanded to 18 holes in 1951. The golf course was originally a links-type course, but has evolved into a parkland course due to all the trees that were planted and have since matured. The course was laid out around an ancient Austrian fortification erected for the defense of Venice. The fortification is intertwined through the course. This building served as military lodging and a horse stable, but now it constitutes the backbone of the current clubhouse. Since the golf course's inception, famous royalty, dignitaries, and golfers have played this course. And the infamous personalities like Hitler and Mussolini have also played here. When the course was originally established, the grasses were what you would find on links-type golf courses. However, as the course became more wooded and matured and given climate conditions, the course is now primarily poa-annua. The greens, tees, and fairways are almost all poa-annua. The rough areas or taller areas are primarily perennial ryegrass with some Kentucky bluegrass. Given the weather conditions at the time when I was there, which were wet and cool conditions, it was not a surprise to see the disease microdochium patch on the greens and collars. We have reached the end of this presentation.